Today is actually a couple of very chashuv yard sites. First of all, today is Yom Yerushalayim. Today is the day that they captured Yerushalayim. So if you're a Natura Karta guy or Satmar, you roll your eyes. But Lamaisa, we wouldn't be able to go to the Koisel today if it wasn't for the fact that they recaptured the Koisel, and it was a tremendous battle. I actually read a book that very very great detail discusses exactly how they got back in to Yerushalayim. At the end of the day, there was no fighting within the old city itself. But till they got through the walls, it was a massacre. Many Yiddish lives were lost. But Baruch Hashem, today we have the Koisel, and we can go to it. We have the old city of Yerushalayim, so we're very blessed to have it. Today is also the yard site of the day that Eretz Yisrael bombed the Iraqi nuclear reactor, the Osirak reactor, which was also a big thing at the time. And I had a fellow who worked for me. America made it sound like they didn't know about it and they condemned it at the time. And in fact, they owed their lives to it because later on during the Persian Gulf War, had Iraq had a nuclear reactor, it would have been a whole different story. So they were very grateful that it was done. But I once interviewed a Pakistani man, a refrigeration mechanic, and he told me that he was working on the roof of the aircraft control tower of the Riyadh Air Base, which was primarily populated by American. It's an American air base, and he says he remembers that all of a sudden they announced, "Okay, break, everybody leave," and everybody left. He was just a contractor, so he was there on the roof working on the air conditioner, and all of a sudden he sees a whole bunch of jets, military jets, fly overhead, and then about 10 minutes later, he sees them flying back in the other direction, and everybody in the air base started cheering, and he didn't know what was going on. And then an hour later, the news came out that the reactor was bombed. And then America made it sound like they didn't know about it, and they made special rules. How could it be that they didn't notice? The whole thing was a bluff. America knew about it the entire time. He was there. He watched it. He witnessed it. So we have to thank your bonus that we have Yerushalayim back. Today is also the yard of Shmuel HaNavi. The Gemara tells us that Shmuel HaNavi was Shava to Moshe Aaron. It says Moshe Aaron b'Chayanav, Shmuel b'Kairi Shemoi. So it's the yard of Shmuel HaNavi that we learned a lot about, even recently, and it's also the yard of the Baltoisus, the Re. So today's some very chashuv yard sites. The schus of all the tzaddikim should be megan upon us. Okay, so we're up to the bottom of Chof Ches Amud Beis Koyach. And we were discussing how, as a matter of fact, yesterday, David asked, what if it was a cloudy day? So the Gemara ends up answering, which is what we just learned, and in fact, it was precisely because it was a cloudy day that a mistake was made between the glare of the moon and the glare of the sun. Because if it wasn't a cloudy day, you can discern the difference between the sun's rays, which is in all directions, and the moon's rays, which would look more like a beam. But being that the sky was overcast, so all of the clouds glow from the light behind it, whether it would be the sun or the moon, and that's how they made a mistake. And the Gemara says that even though the clouds seem to block out the sun, in fact they don't. If anything, they magnify and amplify the sun, and if you're working under the clouds, you still have a lot of heat there that comes through the clouds, radiates from the clouds. The clouds almost become like a radiant panel. So Amar Reb Nachman, we're at the second last line at the bottom of Chof Ches Amud Beis. Amar Reb Nachman, Zuhama de Shimsha, the heat of the sun, Kashi Mishimsha, is even hotter than the sun. And what Rashi tells us, what it means, Zuhama de Shimsha, what it means is, Oisei Chaim Shal Yom HaMa'unim. The heat that we get from the sun, even on a cloudy day, is even more hot than on a sunny day. Why? The Simonach Dana Dechala, a barrel of vinegar. In Rashi, Shapia Sosum Yofev. It's completely sealed. So it shouldn't weaken. And then neck of cotton, when you make a small hole in it, from that little hole, it comes out a very, very strong smell. Imagine you have your freshly grated myrrh in a Tupperware container, and then you snap off the lid for a second, you take a whiff, it'll knock you out. So too a cloudy day. Since the sun is covered, and its heat is sort of held back. So where the sun does penetrate, it penetrates with a vengeance. Now, those who learn is that the clouds themselves become heated, and they radiate heat as well.
I think a low pressure.
What are shaviri the shimsha? Rashi Sanurim, the small rays of light that puncture the clouds. When there's a hole in the cloud, you'll get like a pencil, like a laser of light coming through those little holes. Kasha mishimsha, they're harder. They hit you harder than regular sunlight. The Samanach Dilfa, Rashi's Kasha Delef Hayerid Al Adam, Mishem Nichnas Kol Gufa B'Mayim. One drop hits you harder than toivling in a mikveh. If you ever took a shower, some shower heads are adjustable. You can just have a regular spray, or you could adjust it to be a massage head. And when it's massaged, instead of coming out from the whole shower head, it only comes out from 2 or 3 holes that blasted on you. There, of course, you feel it much stronger. And that's the comparison to the small rays that happen to find a hole in the clouds to penetrate down. And now we get into practical stuff. Herhure Avera, thinking about Avera, and Rashi says, what does that mean in particular? Taivas Noshim, thinking about Taivas Noshim is Koshim Lahakish Espesori, they weaken a person, Yosy Megufo Shamaisa, more than if he actually is involved in the Maisa of Zivuk. So Herhure Koshim Avera, the Simonach and Yosimon is Recha de Bisra. And Rashi says, if you walk by a barbecue and you smell that sizzling steak, Hamarich Basar Tzli, Kosheloi Harech Ma'oichem Esavaloi. The reach, the contemplation of the enjoyment that you're going to have when you eat that sizzling steak grasps you even more. There's a lot of different svaros that explain why Herhure Avera is Kosher Avera. One svar that's shared, and there's a lot of people involved. There's a Chidah, the Ben Yada, and there's so many different svaros. I don't remember who says what. So but I hope I could be yoytze the baby gul oilam if I, as a bulk, say all the different people that said beautiful svaros. So one of the svaros offered why Herhure Avera is Kosher Avera is because Herhure Avera doesn't end. A Maisa is finite; it has a beginning, it has an end. Herhure Avera lingers and goes on. Imagination and fantasy is unlimited, so that's why Herhure Avera could be worse. The Moira Nevuchim says Herhure Avera is worse because what differentiates a human from a behemoth? Seichel. Herhure Avera is using seichel, is using the maila that the Kodesh Baruch Hu gave us over behemoths. A behemoth does a maisa. Behemoths do zivug as well. But when we use our mind, a special gift that we have that makes us greater than the behemoth, we use that for Avera. That's so much worse. And someone else said in that vein, similar, that there's 3 shutfim ba'adam. There's the father, the mother, and the Kodesh Baruch Hu. The father and the mother contribute to the physical guf, the different parts of the physical guf of a person. But the machshava, that's the part that a Kodesh Baruch Hu gives him. So we're actually, by Herhure Avera, we're actually violating the gift, the contribution that the Rebbeinu Shalom gave to us. Another svar they say is Herhure Avera, you don't give it much attention. Okay, I thought about Avera. If you do an Avera, that's something that bothers you, want to do tshuva for. But I hear Avera, people don't do so much tshuva for. They don't think it's such a bad thing. They don't realize how bad it really is. And the last svara, he says, I believe he says it from the Chidah, that the Chidah said that the carbon that we bring for Herhure Avera is a carbon oila. A carbon oila is the only carbon that's completely burnt on the mizbeach. So you see here, Herhure Avera requires the biggest kapara because it's entirely burnt on the mizbeach, more than the karbanis that would be for an actual ma'isa there. Zok tehel gemor vayter. Shili de kaita, the end of the summer. So come fall. Kasha mikaita is even hotter than the summer itself. The simonech tanura shagira, and the simon is an oven that's preheated, even though it has no fire in it now, still packs a punch when it comes to the heat. Rashi shili de kaita elul shu soifa kites kasha mikaita kasha chaymoy michayim makait shel tamuz. Why is that? The air is all heated up. The gufa brios, and people are heated up. The choy makayits shall overlove tumid because they're constantly submerged in the heat of the summer. The smallest amount of heat has an impact. So this is one of the laws of thermodynamics. As a heating guy, people always ask me, should I set back my thermostat when I'm not there? And how far should I set it back? So the rule is as follows. You should never set your thermostat. Let's say in the summer you set your air conditioner at 70. When you leave during the day, don't bring it up to 80. Maybe bring it up to 72, 74. Why is that? Because it's not just the air of your house that gets heated up. It's the mass in your house, the wooden studs, the drywall, the furniture. There's so much mass that is going to absorb heat. In order for you to get rid of that heat, once your temperature is lowered, once you're at the setting where the temperature is lowered, it doesn't just have to cool the air, because the air is constantly going to get heated from the residual heat that's in the mass. And therefore, you're going to use a lot of more energy to cool down all that mass. So you're better off not setting it back so far so that the mass stays cool. And this way, the air conditioner, when it has to catch up, only has to cool the air. However, if you're going away for an extended period of time, yes, and then you don't care if the mass heats up. But if it's just like during the day, you shouldn't set your thermostat back more than maybe 3 or 4 degrees. And this is exactly what the Gemara is telling us. The Gemara is telling us is that since all of the mass and the people have so much heat in them from the whole summer, it doesn't take much heat to overheat them because they still have heat in their system. And once again, Ishta de Sisva, the heat of the fall or winter is kashim midakait is much bigger. If you have a fever, if you have a fever and you're hot and sweaty, in the winter it's a much worse fever than it would be if you had it in the summer. Rashi says, if you have fever in the winter, it's very hot. Someone who's sweating from fever in the winter has a much more severe condition than the person who only has fever in the summer, because it takes a lot more heat to heat someone during the winter. If you have an oven that's cold and you want to heat it up, you need a lot more fuel to heat that up. So too, this person, the air is cold, and his body is cold, and nevertheless, his sickness, his illness, is still making him so hot, it must be very serious. And then, halacha l'maisa, migmar ba'atikta kosher mechadato. It's much harder to chazer than it is to learn new Torah. V'simanach tina bartina, and your simon is, it's much easier to make cement out of fresh ingredients than when you're grinding down old cement to recycle it. Migmar ba'atikta kosher mechadato, mishalamad. So someone who learned, and then he forgot, kosher lachser v'lomad. It's very hard to get back into it. Mashashokach, what you forgot, yosh bin mashalamad, from something that you didn't learn. The Michtav Mloyo says it's human nature. Human nature is, I'm never going to put my full concentration into chazering. Why? Because I'm convinced that I know it already. But something that I learned already, something that I've never learned, there I go in with 100% of my faculties, and it's easier for someone to absorb new things than to refresh himself on old things, which teaches us that you have to spend extra effort to focus when you're chazering so that you'll get the full benefit of the chazara. If you want to reuse tit from an old wall, it's harder to mix it, much harder than using fresh ingredients. My time at the Rebbe. What is for Rebbe? Rashi says the Omar Timur Shalchama Mafsiya. Rebbe said that the glare of the sun doesn't come out like a beam; it spreads out in all directions. Where does Rebbe get it from? So I love when this happens. So the Gemara begins to bring a pasuk. So I always ask this question: you see the Metzias, the sun is in all directions. Why do you need a pasuk for? So I was told many times that it's a bigger raya to bring a raya from a pasuk than Metzias. A pasuk is a bigger raya to fact, to reality, than even the Messias. So if we want to bring a raya that the sun explodes in all direction, it's better verified by bringing a pasuk to support that than by saying, look. And this could be illustrated by a story where sometimes even reality is not a good raya because people are fooled by it. Because they say over a famous story with two blondes, and they were looking up at the moon, and one of them said, what do you think is closer? And they were standing in Toronto, looking up at the moon, and one of them said, what do you think is closer, the moon or New York City? So her friend answers her, what type of question is that? Can you see New York City from here? So you see, sometimes Mitzvah is not a raya. The best raya is from the Torah. So what does it say in the Gemara? My time in the Rebbe, this was the Kapitel Chav Beis. This is Kapitel Chav Beis that we said that it's brought down that Esther, David, Antinus Esther, and Ayelas HaShachar is a female ram. So Ma Ayelazu, a ram, Karner Maftsilois, Lakan, its horns go in all directions. Av Shachar, so too the light of the morning. Av Shachar Zeh Mafsil Lakan. So Rashi points out, interesting enough, Ayala is Lav Dafka. Lav Dafka Nokat, Share'ein Karnayim Lunakeva. A female ayil does not have horns. But we still are using it as a limud that it goes in all directions. Av Shachar Zeh Mafsil Lakan. The Ben Yoda says an interesting halacha lemaisa from this, and that is we're talking about Alois HaShachar. Legabe certain halachas, Alois HaShachar is considered day, like we discussed to bring the carbon. Legabe certain halachas, it's not day until nights. We're makbet the Megillah after nights. So that's what it means. Its horns go in every direction, meaning it straddles day and night. It's in all directions. It also means that it has a wide impact. So Ayala is a good name for a person who has a great impact on the world. So if someone wants to change the world, Ayala is a good name because its tentacles, so to speak, its horns, its impact is felt everywhere. Amar Abzeir said, Lama Nimshla Esther Ayala. Why was Esther compared to an Ayala? Loimalach, it tells you, this is a little bit of an adult nature. Ma Ayala, Rachmatzar. An Ayala has a very narrow rechem, and because of that, it's a tight opening. V'chaviv al baila, that makes a bia more enjoyable, and because of that, her husband always likes her. Kol shah v'shah, all the time. Kishari shana, just like the first time, because the opening remains tight, and that's a maila for her husband. Af Esther, so to Esther, chaviv al Achashverosh, kol shah v'shah kishari shana. Every time Achashverosh had an opportunity to be with Esther, she was just as enjoyable as the very first time. Esther said this Kapitel Tehillim, Kivin Shegil Besat Slomim, Nistal Kaimen Shchina, Amr, she said, which is in that Kapitel Chaveis, Keli La Mazaftani. Another shot that they say is that the Gemara tells us, I believe in Megillah, that since the Ayala has a very narrow rechem, so when it has to give birth, how is its baby going to get out? So a snake comes and bites the ayil in the rechem, the Ayala by the rechem. I guess that relaxes the muscles, that causes it to open up, and that lets the baby come out. And the Gemara tells us, so too, Klal Yisrael is nimshala to an Ayala, and we get stung by Haman, we get stung by Amalek, and that opens us up to become closer to the Rebbeinu Shalom, to the tshuva, and to can reconnect with the Rebbeinu Shalom. Amar Basi, Lama Nimshala Esther LaShachar. Why it was Esther compared to the morning? Loimalach to tell us. Ma Shachar Soif Kol Halayla. Just like Shachar is the end of the night, so the bad times are ending, and we're coming into the light. Of Esther Soif Kol Nisim. It's actually exactly the opposite of what I said. So too, Esther was the end of the era of the Nisim. How could you say that Esther was the end of the era of the Nisim? There was a great Nes of Chanukah, which occurred in the second Beis Hamikdash, which was long after the Maisa in Bavel, the Maisa of Purim, which occurred during Golas Bavel. So Nitna Likosef Karminon. What we're referring to is Nisim that were written down. And Chanukah, there is no Megillah on Chanukah. The last nest that was recorded in a sefer of Tanakh, is Megillah Esther. So Esther Nitna. That'll make perfect sense if you actually hold like that it has a din of one of the Svarim of the Tanakh. Esther Lloyd Nitna. According to the Mandamer, that it was not Nitna L'Kasev, my Ikla. And the Gemara in Megillah Daf Zayin tells us that Esther, after the story, asked the Rabbanim, can we record this in a sefer? And there was a machlokes tanoim of whether or not she was allowed. And they're darshaning the pasuk in Parashas B'Shalach that discusses Mechiyas Amalek, and it says Ksoiv Zois Zikaron B'Sefer. And they darshan the psukim as follows. One time the darshan is Ksoiv Zois is referring to the Parsha of B'Shalach of Mechiyas Amalek. Zikaron is referring to the Parsha in Kiseitze of the Parsha Zohar, and Zikaron B'Sefer is referring to something that happened in Shmuel, which means when Shaul killed out Amalek then, which means there's no pasuk telling us to record Megillas Esther. However, somebody else dashing the pasuk is Ksayv Zois is referring to both incidences in the Torah, Mishalach and like he said, Zikaron is referring to Shmuel, and B'Sefer is referring to Megillas Esther. But what's the nafkamina? If Esther is nitn l'kasev or not, it is written down. The nafkamina is if it has a din of one of the svarim of Tanakh. L'may nafkamina, Chazal were goyzer tumah on svarim, and if it's considered a sefer, it would have a din tumah midrabanan. If not, no. So according to the Mandamar, that Esther nitn l'kasev, ma'i kalameimar. What does it mean? Why is Esther nimshal layala? Because it's soif kol nisim. What does it mean soif kol nisim? So tomorrow, mukum lok Rabbi Yoma bar Yosef, Amar Belazar. Tamar Rabbi Yoma Yosef, Amar Belazar, lo min nimshlu tfilah and shol tzadikim. Why are the tfilah of tzadikim? Nimshal kayelas. Why are they compared to an ayelas? Lo yimulach to tell you, ma ayala zu, just like a ram, kolzman shemigadelas. As long as it's growing, as long as the animal's growing, krener mavtzilois, its horns also spread and grow more and more. Af tzadikim kolzman shemarben b'tfilah. The more we daven tfilas nishmas, our tefillos are heard. Meaning those horns spread out and take and grow into new and better places. They constantly move around. So too, every single tefillah, whether we realize it or not, every single tefillah is accepted by the Rebbeinu Shalom, and eventually we're gonna be heard. And Rashi says, "Shekol zman shemigadelas," as long as the animal is growing, karnem avtzilos, its horns spread out more. They get another branch, another growth. So too our tefillos have an impact everywhere. So there's a lot of raid. Why is it in fact that the Nes of Purim is recorded in a sefer and not the Nes of Chanukah? So the Satmar Rebbe has a very nice pshat. The Satmar Rebbe says that what was the Nes? The Nes of Purim was a Nes where our Yiddishkeit was threatened, our Torah Shabbat was threatened. The Nes of Chanukah is all about Torah Shabbat. What does it mean, v'timu kol hashmanim? A goy is not makabel tumah. The reason why the goy was metama all the shmanim is because there's a gzeira derabanan that goyim have a din of tumah, and they'll be metama things. So the whole nes was only a nes of Torah Shabbat Peh, to protect Torah Shabbat Peh, because of the gzeira that the goy is metama. Zok to Satmar Rebbe, if the whole nes is all about Torah Shabbat Peh, so we should write it down. It's a nes of Torah Shabbat Peh, it has to remain Shabbat Peh. That's what the Satmar Rebbe said, but I believe the Ksav Sofer says that the reason why the Nes of Chanukah wasn't written down is what would they have recorded by Chanukah? The big Nes of the oil. But the problem is we know that besides the Nes of the oil, the big Nes is that we weren't culturally and spiritually swallowed up by the Yavanim, by the culture of the day. That would never have been recorded, when really that's the main focus of Chanukah. So that's why they didn't write it down, because that's not the part that would have been recorded. That wasn't the sensational part of the story, and that's why we don't write down Chanukah. I'm sorry?
And why couldn't they record that too together with
because that's not the story. You know, there's no sensational story about it.
That's why we need to make it with 20 documents.
Another thing is that another svara that says the Megillah. Somebody else says this. The Nes of Chanukah was an obvious nes. It was an obvious nace, so there was no need to give the Pirush Rashi and Tosfos. But all of the occurrences that occurred by Purim were they did not look, nothing looked sensational at all. We all know that the Megillah spans a period of 9 years, and a whole bunch of little things happen. But when it's put together in one Megillah, then we see how it's all the Yad Hashem. But the occurrences as they occurred didn't seem like anything, so they needed to be recorded to highlight that there's a Yad Hashem and there's a nace here. Chanukah was obvious for all to see that it was a nace. A small army won over a big army, and they found the oil, so that didn't need recording. Okay, let's see the Gemara back to Shachtos HaTamid. So we have to look back at the Mishnah, because the Mishnah talks about two different occurrences. The Mishnah asked, Lama Hotzruchu, why was it necessary to go up on the roof? Because they once went up, they once didn't go up, they thought it was the sun was really the moon. And then after that story, the Mishnah tells us they took the Kohen Gadol Leveis HaTfilah. So the question is, was the Kohen Gadol taking the Leveis HaTfilah after that story? Are these things happening at the same time? Are they different stories? What's the understanding of the Mishnah? So the Gemara says, Amos, when did this occur, this mistake? Because at this point, the Gemara thinks, Rashi tells us, that the story goes on. After they had this mistake with the Korban Tamid being shechted too early, then they took the Kohen Gadol that day to the Beis HaTfilah. So the Gemara asks, if the story did not occur in Yom Kippur, well, Loi Sagi the Lav Kohen Gadol, why was it necessary to have the Kohen Gadol? On the day other than Yom Kippur, you don't need a Kohen Gadol. Elo b'Yom Kippurim. It must be that this story occurred on Yom Kippur. The problem is, Me'ar Halavana Mi'ika, on the 10th day of the month, you'll never have the moon just beyond the eastern horizon where you would possibly see that in the morning. It's only at the beginning of the month where you might find the moon right at the horizon, where it's possible in the early morning hours you'll see moonlight. But at the 10th day of the month, that will never happen. So this story could not have occurred on Yom Kippur. Zaktamar Hachikamar. It's two different things. Story A is sometime during the year, not on Yom Kippur. There was this mistake that occurred. They thought it was daybreak, when really it wasn't. And they brought the Korban Tamid, they shechted the Korban Tamid too early. And then a different story is getting back to our subject matter. On Yom Kippurim, once it was already daybreak, he Omar Barak Bar Koyu, Haridu Kohen Gadol Leveis HaTfilah. So there's really two things happening in our Mishnah. The Mishnah took a little break from discussing Yom Kippur to tell us a story about a mistake that they made. And that's why we have this whole production with someone going up on the roof. And then the Gemara got back to Yom Kippur, which is that the Kohen Gadol has to go to the mikveh once we confirm that it's daybreak.
Yosy.
The father of Ababin.
Yosy.
And at this point, the Gemara thinks it's a membra. It's not a Tana being quoted.
I don't think he hears.
As follows. Loy
Okay, I guess not.
Not only if you shech Korban Tamid too early, are you going to have a problem, and it's going to be a puzzle of carbon. If someone made Malika too early, or Kamitas Mincha,
send him an email.
Send
him a message.
Tosfos asks a very interesting question. Why, if you would have made this Kamitas too early, well, then there's another problem that you were makravit before the Korban Tamid, because if we're not talking about the Korban Tamid that had to be burned, we're just talking about something else that occurred earlier. So never mind the psul that it was done by night. What about the psul that it was shechted before the Korban Tamid? So Tosfos has a long shtickle about it, but one of the svaros Tosfos says is this iser that you can't do any carbon before the Korban Tamid is not referring to the shchita or the malika; it's referring to the haktara. So anyway, Avud Reb Avin learned that this applies as well to a mincha and to a kaimitz. Zok the Gemara, Bishlama oilas oif. Oh, so Duvi's. Oh, I cannot hear. Oh, Duvi, I didn't hear you say anything.
Can you hear me now?
You're speaking, but I don't hear you. I wonder why not.
Yeah.
Let me see if my speaker's not working. Let's try now. Duvi, can you speak?
Can you hear me?
I don't hear you. I don't hear anything that you're saying. I'm not sure why not. Can somebody else speak?
Testing. No, can't hear me either.
I
Guess
don't
not.
hear anything. No, I don't hear. I was wondering. I thought I didn't hear anybody. So let me see why. Let me just check here in a second. Test speakers. I don't hear a ringtone. Let me see why. Oh, so that's the problem. I'm not connecting. For some reason, my speakers aren't connecting. So let me shut this off completely. Oh, that's what's going on. No wonder I don't hear anybody. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you just fine.
I can't hear you. I can see you talking, but I can't hear you. I wonder why not. Oh, that's what's going on. So let me. Can you hear me? I think you can still hear me.
Yeah, I can still hear you. Although there's some weird
No,
kind
I
of
cannot hear
high
you.
pitched
Something's
feedback.
wrong. Okay, so at least David sent me a text, and he asked, isn't the moonlight bigger at the beginning, in the middle of the month? That's when the moon is big. It's small at the beginning and at the end. In the time, it's small, but where it is located, you see it on the horizon, but you don't see it on the horizon in the middle of the month. Okay, I was wondering why it was getting so quiet around here. Chayzi, you gotta help me out. Okay, Zog to Gemara weiter. Bishlam Eilos Oif. Bishlam Eilos Oif, Maida Hava Hava. Once you made the Kmitza, it's dead. So of course it's going to be possible if you made the Kmitza too early. Ela Kaimitz, but the Kaimitz itself, Nahadra, just put it back. What is a Kaimitz? You took some of the mixture of flour and oil. So what's the big deal? Put it back in. V'nik Kmitza b'yamama, and redo the Kmitza by day. So why is it that we say that Rabbi Abin said it's going to be possible, it'll be a problem? So who tani love who amala? He quoted this brisa, and he's going to answer and explain it. That klisharis makachin, afilu shloib is mama. He took the kmitza out, he placed it into klisharis. That gives it a din of a kmitza, and once it has a din of a kmitza, the rest is shirayim. So come daybreak, it's possible enough, and even though it wasn't a legitimate kmitza because it was done too early, since it was placed into klisharis, the klisharis, even though this is not a good kmitza, it's going to be makadashit, and that's why it becomes possible. Meisvei, is that so that a klisharis, when it's not doing the proper avodah, is that true in fact that the klisharis will give it a kedusha and therefore it'll be possible? Ze'aklal, we learned this is the rule. Kol hakarev b'yoyim, anything that you're supposed to be makriv by day, and Rashi as an example says hamanochos, v'alavoina, v'adam v'aktayos. So the halach is kadosh b'yoyim. It will become kadosh b'klisharis b'yoyim. So if it's supposed to be brought by day, then the klisharis will be makadashit by day. However, v'chol hakarev b'layla, but anything that's supposed to be brought by night, and the gears have changed over here, v'chol hakarev b'layla, kadosh bein b'yoyim ubein b'layla. If it's supposed to be done by night, then no matter when you do it, it's going to be kadosh. Katani mios. Let's analyze what we just learned. Kol hakarev b'yoyim, kadosh b'yoyim. Anything that's supposed to be brought by day will only become kadosh in the chlisharis if you put it in the chlisharis by day, such as a kmitza, b'yoymin balayla loy, dafka by day and not by night. So if that's the case, the kmitza that you did at night, why will that passel everything because it was put into a klisharis? Even if it was placed into the klisharis, this brisa tells us if it was done at the wrong time, since it was supposed to be done by day and it was done by night, it shouldn't have an impact. So why isn't this mincha kosher? So why is it that we learned in the name of the father of Avin that in fact that kmitza will be possible? It shouldn't be possible. You should just do it over because the fact that you put it into klisharis should have no impact because it was supposed to be done by day and it was done by night. So Gemara, maybe what the Brisa means to say, Dum Eina Kaddish Likarev. Maybe what it's saying is it won't be Kaddish. In other words, the Klisharis won't correct the problem and allow you to be Makavit on the Mizbeach. Avol Kaddish Liposel. But maybe the Klisharis has enough of an impact to passel it, and that's why the Avud Rabbanan said that it's possible. So we'll have another kasha on what the Avud Rabbanan said. Siddur es halechem. What happens if they set up the lechem upon him, and the little spoons of levaina, achar Shabbos? They didn't do it on Shabbos; they did it on Sunday. So they set up the lechem upon him on the wrong day of the week. The hikter es habezichen b'Shabbos. Nevertheless, the next Shabbos, when the next Shabbos came, they made believe everything was fine, and they were makter the bezichen on the mizbeach, which is the part of the lechem upon him offering that's put on the mizbeach. The word psula, many Rishonim take out, and they say Ketzad Yasa. And the reason why they take it out is because we're soon going to see the Maskana of the Gemara is in fact that it's not possible. So Ketzad Yasa, how do you fix this situation? Yanichenu l'Shabbos haba. Leave the lechem upon him on for this Shabbos, but don't take it off this Shabbos because it's not properly placed because it was originally put on Sunday, and you have to leave it to next week, which means this week there won't be lechem upon him. But at least this lechem upon him won't be possible, and this lechem upon him will be able to be used for the next week. Even if the lechem upon him that was placed there on the Sunday on the wrong day, even if it's left there several days, it will have no impact. Why? Because it was done at the wrong time. So you clearly see that if something is placed in the klisharis on the shulchan at the wrong time, it doesn't have a kedusha. So why our kmitza does the Avud Rabbanan say there's a problem? V'amai tikdush with the apostle. According to Avud Rabbanan, that when you place it into a klisharis, even though it's at the wrong time, it's possible. So why isn't this lechem apolim possible as well? Amar Rava man the kamoshev shaper kamoshev. This is a very, very good kasha. This is a very good kasha on Avud Rabbanan. Avud Rabbanan nami mesnisa kamar. And Avud Rabbanan wasn't just saying a Gemara; he was saying over a brisa. So in fact, we now have two brises that contradict each other. The Avud Rabbanan says that the Kemitza done at night does get Kedusha in the Klisharis, and therefore it's possible. Yet the other brisa says that the Lechem upon him that's placed at the wrong time, it's placed on Sunday onto the Shulchan, it doesn't become possible. That has no impact. That it was placed in the Klisharis has no impact. Zok the Gemara, the Kasavar, Laila, Ein Mechusar Zman. It's not a stira. You know why? Because in the case of Avud Rabbanan, all that you did was you did the Kemitza the night before the day it was supposed to be done. If it's done just at the night before it was supposed to be done, Ein Mechusar Zman. We don't consider that Mechusar Zman to the point that the Klisharis won't be Mekadosh. But Yoim Mechusar Zman. But if it's completely on a different day, like you did it on Sunday, instead of on Shabbos, that's considered Mechusar Zman. That's a much greater departure from what the timing should have been. So I agree with you that since it was put on Sunday, the lechem upon him get no kedusha, and therefore it won't become possible. But the problem is you're leaving it there all week, and you're leaving it to Shabbos. So what's going to happen Friday night when the lechem upon him is sitting there on the shulchan Friday night? Tikdosh v'tif soil. At that point, it should become kaddish in the shulchan because it's sitting there the night before, and we just said that the night before it's not considered mechusar zman, and the shulchan will still be able to give it kedusha, and therefore it should be possible when Shabbos morning arrives with lina. This brisa that says that you can salvage it, what it means is, yeah, you leave it to next week, but make sure to take it off before Shkia on Erev Shabbos, and don't put it back on until Shabbos morning. So it's not going to be there the night before, and therefore it won't be able to get that kedusha of the klishari, so it should become possible in the morning. Even if you left it on there, so therefore it should become kaddish b'chlisharis the night before, but here by shulchan is different. Since when you originally put it on, it was put on improperly, that whole putting on is disqualified. You look at it like a monkey put it on there. In other words, it wasn't even done by a human. So we don't even look at it like it was legitimately placed on the shulchan, and therefore it will not get a kedusha, and therefore it will not become possible when Shabbos day arrives. Let's see what Rashi says on this. Rashi says, "Nasa kamosha sidra akoif shalom midaita." It's like it happened by itself. It wasn't done by a human, so it was never placed into a klisharis in such a way where it could even get kedusha. Sharai nister kodem leil Shabbos ala shulchan. The lechem apanim was placed at the shulchan even before the night before Friday night. Earlier in the week it was placed, the shashu mechusas man, at a time where it has no impact, it's mechusas man. And let's look at the Bach. He adds and changes a little bit to the words. And then the Bach says, "Be'ata b'Shabbos," and now on Shabbos, "Kishemegias manoi," when the right time arrives to place it on, "Eina shulchan mekachay," the shulchan will not be able to mekadosh it because there was no placement on them. Ad sheyisalkenu mimenu, until you remove the lechem upon him from the shulchan, the yachzer v'yisterenu, and you place it upon the shulchan once again. And that's exactly what we'll do. The kohen will come in Shabbos morning, and v'yisalkenu, he'll take the lechem upon him off the shulchan, v'yisadrenu, and they'll put it back on. What about a koimitz? Why by a koimitz don't you say the same thing? Since I did it at the wrong time, it's as if a monkey did it. It's not comparable to a koimitz where the komitz was done by night. The lechem shenister b'leil Shabbos, or if the lechem upon him was originally put on Friday night, the lav mechusas manu, that's not considered mechusas man, and therefore we look at it like it was done properly by a human, the kodesh lifasa. That's how Rashi learns. Okay, let me see where we're holding. Let's see if we can go a little weiter. We can go a little bit weiter. Zok to Gemara. Zeh klal hoya b'mikdash. There was a rule in the base of Mikdash. The Mishnah tells us, anytime somebody was mesach raglov, anytime somebody had a bowel movement, he had to toivel in the mikveh, and v'chol matal mayim, and anyone who made meiraglayim, ton kiddush yadayim v'raglayim, he has to wash his hands and feet in the kiyar. Zok to Gemara. Bishlam regalim, bishlam by meiraglayim. The reason why you have to wash your hands, mishum netzoitzes. I'm sorry, my mistake. You have to do kiddush yadayim v'raglayim. I understand why you have to wash your feet off, mishum netzoitzes, because of drips that might have dripped on your feet, and you have to wipe them off. So the Chedush Arim, I believe, asks, I don't understand. Why is that a reason why you have to wash your feet? Wipe it off. Why do you have to wash them? Right? So the Sefer Chinuch talks about this, and I believe the Chedush Arim talks about this. And they both ask the kasha, why is that a reason why you should have to wash your feet and just wipe it off? The teretz is because once there's hesach hadas, you need to once again make the netila. If there was netzoitzes on it, it for sure is considered like there was a hesach hadas done on it, because it had something that was mamish dirty on it, and therefore it would need not only to be wiped off, it would also need a kiddush raglayim. El yadayim my time. Why is it that you have to wash your hands? Why is it kiddush yadayim v'raglayim? There should only be a kiddush raglayim.
So according to the Chedush Arim, there's no kasha over here on the yadayim.
Why?
Because there's hesach hadas.
On the feet, no, the feet, not the hands. No. He doesn't mean there's a real hesach hadas from you not concentrating. It means the feet clearly were removed from kedusha. So Gemara Amar Baba Yosy Meres. This teaches you mitzvah l'shafshev. When you wipe off your feet, it's not enough just to give it a wipe. You actually have to mitzvah l'shafshev biyodoi. You have to scrub it off with your hand. Nitzoitzoi shomei raglayim hanitzon al raglav. So by definition, you're going to use your hand and you're going to touch the meraglam because you have to wipe it off. Why is it so important to wipe it off by hand? You're not allowed to go out of the bathroom with meraglayim on your feet. Why? Because normally when we urinate, there's a projectile. It shoots it far away from our body, so it shouldn't be landing on our feet. If it lands on your feet, there's a reason to assume that a person has a problem with his aver, and because they'll say she'ein mei raglav makalchen el shoysen. People will say that he doesn't shoot it like a projectile; it just drips out, which means he has a problem that he cannot marry a Jewish woman, and someone who the chushavcha cannot have children, which means, and he does have children. V'yoyim Rabbanim Shenim Shaloi is going to cause people to say, "Oh, this guy can't have children, yet he does." I wonder who the milkman was. So David's asking if they didn't have a paper towel. I guess they didn't have those things in those days. But forget it. Yet what the Gemara is saying is, even though you could wipe it off, you're mechuyev to rub it off with your hands, and then you have to wash. But we'll be mamshech tomorrow, hopefully with an audio system that I'll figure out how to make work. I apologize.